We're going to be talking about 5 hidden losses and how to tackle them at your bar or restaurant. Before we get started, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Crystal Hopkins, and I'm the Digital Marketing Assistant Manager here at BuzzTime. I was born and raised in San Diego, and I've been with the company for almost 2.5 years now. And today I'm presenting with Ian Foster from Sculpture Hospitality. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Ian.
Thank you, Crystal. Yeah, my name is Ian Foster. I'm the Regional Director for Sculpture Hospitality. We help bars and restaurants make more money, generally by helping them reduce losses from overpouring, misringing, theft, things like that. And I've been with our company for over 25 years.
All right, thanks. Oh, keep going, sorry.
No, I just said hello to all our viewers here.
Perfect. All right, so thanks, Ian. So we are about to dive into our presentation. If along the way you guys have any questions, go ahead and chat us in the general section, and we'll answer those at the end. Actually, it looks like people cannot hear you, Ian.
I don't know why.
Let's see.
Okay, let me change my microphone.
Okay.
Is that better?
Can you guys hear him now? Okay, sorry about that, guys. So when we're recording all of this, and we'll send that out, and you should be able to hear both sides. So thanks for being patient again. So we're going to look at our first hidden loss, which is high labor costs. So how do you spot high labor costs? It is definitely a red flag if more than 30 to 35% of your gross sales goes towards your labor costs. So this can usually happen because of high employee turnover. You might be overstaffing on certain nights with too many waiters or bartenders. Basically, there isn't enough oversight on exactly how many employees can handle how much work. Luckily, this one's really easy to fix with 3 tactics. Number 1 is reducing your employee turnover. So on average, bars and restaurants lose around $146,000 each year to staff turnover. And this breaks down into costs of recruiting, training, and a loss in productivity while you're transitioning these new employees. And Cornell actually found that per employee, that adds up to almost $6,000. So basically that's crushing your annual profit. So some ways to counter this is keeping good employees happy, incentivize them to stay with your business, reward them for performance, conduct a lot of team building activities to keep building camaraderie between your employees and your establishment. This ultimately also builds a sense of loyalty to your business too. Our next step is hiring smart. So Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, I'm sure you are all aware of him. He has this quote, "I will only hire someone to work directly for me if I would work for that person." So make sure that when you are interviewing new candidates, that you're really thinking about the characteristics and qualities you want your employees to have based on how you would want things to run. So while you can often get a good feeling about someone, make sure that you aren't just hiring by your gut. Check their references. We recommend 3. And run these background checks to make sure that this is actually someone you want to bring on board. All right, so tactic number 2 for reducing high labor cost is staffing based on sales. So you all should have some sort of POS system that tracks sales trends and breaks it down by time of day, day of week, and time of year. If you don't, we highly recommend that you research some systems that might be the best for your bar or restaurant. But these systems should give you a pretty good idea of what your slow and busy days and times are. Obviously, you need less staff during the slower times and more for when things start to pick up. So you should staff according to these trends. Luckily, there's a couple of tools out there that can make scheduling really easy. For example, Open Table, 7 shifts, and When I Work are great. They're really user-friendly, and they also help keep track of employee work times. All right, and our last tactic to reduce labor costs is by going beyond the clock in. So basically this means that you're accurately tracking when employees clock in and how they're managing their time afterwards. So like we talked about previously, you can use your POS or scheduling tool to keep track of when employees start their shift. But then you want to make sure that you're looking for employees that are dragging their feet or maybe excessively socializing when they should be working. And this is also something good to bring up in monthly reviews with your staff members to make sure that your team's all on the same page and that they're all staying up to standard. So that was the first hidden loss. I'm going to pass it over to Ian to discuss the next.
Thank you, Crystal. The loss that I'm going to talk about right now is the loss that every bar is experiencing from overpouring and lost sales. And this is actually a much bigger problem than bar owners think. That also means that fixing it is going to have a bigger impact on profit. Most of the clients we work with find they make about $1,000 more every single week just by focusing on this and fixing the problems. So what's the red flag? Well, I wish I could tell you a red flag. Almost every bar, no matter what their pour cost is, will find that they're missing about 20%. Between 20 and 30% is the average we see from overpouring and lost sales. I guess if the problem's that big, the question is, how come it isn't obvious to us on our financial statements? How come there isn't like a obvious red flag we can look at? And I think the problem is that most operators tend to focus on their pour cost every month. And pour cost tends to often mislead us in that we think the bar is doing great when it actually isn't. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that your pour cost usually looks pretty low if you compare it to your food cost or your labor cost. So, if you're running a 33% food cost and a 20% alcohol cost, it's kind of tempting just to worry about the food because it sounds like a lot worse. The other issue with pour cost is that most of us are comparing our pour cost this month to how we did last month or the month before. And if we've had 20% losses kind of built into that number forever, we look at say a 19% pour cost, and last month we were at 19.5, and the month before we were at 20. That all sounds great. What we don't know is that we should be a lot lower. I'll come back to that in a minute. But this, when the pour cost looks pretty good in comparison to your trends, you don't spend a lot of time worrying about the bartenders. And as a result, they sometimes they almost always fall into some bad habits, like, routinely overpouring, sometimes not ringing drinks up, things like that. And there's a number of things you can do about it. Improving inventory tracking, instituting the right controls in your business, and protecting your customers. Let me move on to a couple of those. First thing that I think is super important is to improve just the information that you're getting about your inventory. If you don't have the right information, it's very hard, if not impossible, to identify the problems. So, I think that starts by understanding what your ideal pour cost is. Now, your ideal pour cost is what number you would have run based on your sales that week if you didn't have any losses from overpouring and theft and stuff like that. So if we know, for example, that our actual pour cost is, say, 20%, but we know that our ideal pour cost is 17%, we can see we're quite a ways off of that, and we at least understand that a problem exists. The next step after that, of course, is to go a step deeper, and that's if we match up your usage on every brand to the POS sales or cash register sales, we can not only know there's a problem, we can actually figure out what the problems might be. So the other thing we want to do is we always want to check our deliveries in. It sounds like such a simple thing, like restaurant management 101, but it's amazing how many times when we're doing audits for our clients, we find out that, hey, you didn't actually get that case of beer that's on the invoice. I wouldn't say it happens every week, but it happens enough times that you can tell that people aren't actually very carefully checking the deliveries. Going back to matching up usage and sales and being able to identify these things, almost all our clients take a weekly physical inventory so that you can see every week what's going on. You don't have to wait till the end of the month, see a big number on your pour cost and really not know where to start. So we want to analyze the inventory metrics like pour cost, ideal pour cost. We actually have a number that our clients like to look at, and that's called the Bev & Co. efficiency rating. And what that is, it's your ideal pour cost divided by your actual pour cost. So if you're really running a 17% and your ideal is a 17% divided by 17% gives you a 100% Bev & Co. rating. Most bars, when we first start, their ratings around 75 to 80. And most of my clients now, it's well over 95, most of them over 97%. So, it shows you if you focus on the right stuff and you have the information, you can get these problems fixed. The step after that, of course, is that you've got to have the right policies in place. One big issue that most bars haven't given a ton of thought to is how they're going to look after their regular clientele. We all want that. If you want your regulars to come in and sustain you during the slower periods, your bartenders want them to come in because they're their bartenders, they're their regulars as well. But if you don't give a lot of thought to a policy, like how are we going to sort of make them feel appreciated? What's going to happen, at least what happens in most bars, is the bartenders sort of overpour your regulars to make them feel happier about coming there. And you don't have any way to control that. So if the bartender overpours them like in every drink, which is pretty common, by say 25 or 30%, which is pretty common, it's a lot of money that you don't know. You don't have any way of knowing who's getting those drinks. You don't have any way of knowing how much. And a lot of times the regulators seem to take that for granted. I think almost all our clients have moved to a policy instead that they're going to buy drinks for their regulars. The bartender can have a pretty liberal comp policy. They just have to ring it up and they have to put an explanation of who the comps went to. And they found that brings down the cost of looking after your regulars dramatically. It also lets them track who's getting, what free drinks and how often. And then finally, the regulars like it better anyways. I mean, who wouldn't rather have a free drink bought for them every now and again? Two more points here. One is that when you're bonusing your managers, you got to pick the right metric. You don't want to make it on pour cost. I've got lots of stories about managers manipulating the pour cost number to make their budget. It's really easy to do with pour cost. And finally, I think Ronald Reagan said it best way back in the 1980s that you want to trust your staff, but have a way to verify what's going on. He said that about the Russian START 2 treaty or something like that. And we think doing weekly inventories, let your staff pour normally, but at the end of the week, you'll know if they're not pouring it right, and you can take action. And one of the actions is you want to have really no tolerance for theft. Crystal, why don't you take this page?
Yeah, so last for that is going to be protecting your customers. And then this has to do a lot with payment technology and also theft from the technology that comes with. So you want to use customer-facing dining technology where guests can pay on a menu tablet. This does make them feel more secure considering that their card never leaves their hand. They have the tablet in front of them and they're also doing all of the payment and processing on the tablets as well. And some of these menu tablets do accept NFC and mobile payments. So that data is encrypted, which does reduce the chance that their personal information is going to get stolen. And according to a study, 85% of guests will be more loyal to you if you do take these steps to safeguard their financial security. Obviously, if you feel more comfortable paying with your card on these tablets, you're going to keep going to that establishment rather than quote unquote risking it somewhere else.
Thanks, Crystal.
Yeah. So to go on to the third hidden loss, this is going to be success on social media. So while this one may seem kind of confusing since it is more marketing than an operational task, there are a couple things to look out for when it comes to social media. So the red flag here is that you're getting a lot of likes on your posts or content. You're investing time into posting, but that isn't exactly translating into sales or more traffic. Usually this happens because people are posting random things to their Facebook pages or their Instagram accounts without actually having a strategy. So there needs to be a why behind every post. And this is really easy to do with the social media rule of thirds. So when it comes to social media, the advice you usually hear is that you should keep pitches and the more salesy posts to a minimum. Obviously, people don't want their timeline spammed with just buy our product, come visit our restaurant, etc. And while this is mostly true, a third of your posts should be focused on directly promoting your business. So in order to do this strategically, you want to engage your audience, in this case, your customers. So if they are commenting on your posts, respond back, like have a conversation with them to show them that you appreciate how they interact with your content. And you can also join conversations on other pages. I know a lot of cities have local Facebook pages where you can check in to see news or events that might be happening. And this is the perfect spot to chime in conversations too. Obviously, make sure that you aren't, again, just spamming their page. The key is being relevant and helpful so that people will be more compelled to interact with your content. So step 2 is sharing the right content. So if you have a hashtag, this makes it really easy to search and see what pictures your customers are posting at your location. You might find some share-worthy ones, and this is actually a win-win situation because not only does it get the word out about your brand and you're giving the customer a little shout out on your page, it's done most importantly in a really authentic way, which is going to be more convincing to your other customers and people who come across your profile. You can also make sure to share articles that mention your bar or restaurant. You can set up Google alerts with your business name, and it'll actually send you an email with any mentions you may have gotten from different local publications. And this is also a great way to spread good publicity, which leads me to the last step, promoting your business. So now that you have this engaging content that we talked about, you're going to want to promote your business so that it actually translates into sales dollars. So let's say you're having an event or a special offer. Make sure you create an event on Facebook, for example, to get the word out. People will see it, they'll share it, they'll tell their friends, and that could potentially bring in new faces to your bar or restaurant too. This is most likely to be done if your posts have a specific CTA or call to action. And you want these to be bottom line focused to encourage actual purchases. So for example, let's say you have a new cocktail out and you want to drive sales for that particular item. You could post a great picture of it and then include in your post a CTA to try it today or buy now. This is essentially giving your customers instructions to do something that will drive sales to scale. So kind of just leading them down that funnel. And to go a little further into promoting and different ideas you can use for social media, like we said before, you really need to be engaging with your customers and focusing on the conversations you have with them. A third of your posts should focus on promotions and be trackable by more than just the like. So some examples of this are making a reservation. You can actually set up your Facebook chat and Messenger to include a link to your online reservation page. That way you can track specifically how many people are making reservations. If you're going to be featuring an event at your bar, you can create a Facebook event and track how many people RSVP to attend. Another example is digital coupons. So according to Retail Me Not, 9 in 10 people have used an online coupon in the last 3 months. So not only do those get high engagement rates, but you're also getting high conversion rates that are translating into direct sales for you guys. And lastly, a great way to track the promotion of your business is through email signups. Some easy ways to incentivize people to join your email list is if you offer them a free appetizer or maybe the coupons that we just talked about once they sign up. And obviously it's easy to quantify how many people are joining your email list. But now you also have another channel to market to them beyond social media to encourage those repeat visits and again, to get more sales. All right, so those were a couple ways to effectively use social media. I'm gonna pass it back to Ian once more to go over the next, next.
Thanks, Crystal. Well, the next topic we want to talk about is the low volume sales. So one red flag would be that you have a packed house, but low check averages. You compare check averages to other establishments or to your own bar over time. And if you see that you're on the lower end of where you should be, that should kind of make you think more about, hey, you've got all these people in your business, they're just not spending enough money. We need to find a better, more effective way of increasing our revenues. And it can exist for a number of reasons: poor selling techniques. It could be that your bartenders are routinely over pouring drinks so that clients aren't, or your customers aren't buying as many. And it could be a pricing issue. Sometimes, a lot of times, bars are leaving some money on the table with their pricing. So we're going to fix it with some training, feedback, and we're going to talk a little bit about strategic pricing here. Selling is an interesting topic. All the studies that I've seen show that if you do upselling right, it can work. And by doing it right, I mean, nobody wants to come to a restaurant and feel like they're being sold to. Would you like fries with that? It sounds, it's fine in fast food, but if you're in a upscale restaurant, it sounds kind of cheesy and forced. The key is to teach your staff how to upsell in a way that seems natural, and not like a sales pitch. The second thing we've got here is talking about a signature drink, and it says on the slide, the decision corridor in your bar. That phrase comes from a really interesting study Diageo did about 10 years ago, I think. So Diageo is one of the biggest spirits companies in the world. They sell Bacardi and Johnny Walker and tons of brands. They did a study how customers actually buy drinks. And what their study found was that 60% of your customers haven't decided what they're going to order to drink until the very last second. Like if they're in line, they can't decide. And just right when they step to your bar and the bartender says, "What can I get you?" they make the decision then. It's the last just few seconds. And Diageo talked about that being a real decision corridor, in that your customer at that moment is very receptive to suggestions. They want to know, like, what do you guys do well here? What should I be buying? What am I going to enjoy here that I can't get at every other bar in the city? And that's where a signature drink is a really good idea. Our clients who have developed and promoted their own signature drinks have done exceptionally well with it. One of our clients up in Canada, they have 25 locations, actually 30 now, And they really got well known in their markets by selling a frozen batched slush drink. It was a Bellini. It was bright orange. It actually tasted really good. And it came out in a martini glass. It really turned heads. People liked it. And at the time, they couldn't get it anywhere else. So it was, unique to them, which is a really important thing to do when you're looking at your signature drink list. It should be very profitable for you. You want to make a drink that you have a very good profit margin on, and they do there. The Bellinis are basically vodka and peach schnapps, so it's nothing expensive. And then finally, you want to sell a signature drink. You want to have a signature drink that's memorable. That like this bright orange slushy. You're going to remember that every time you go. And anyway, they've done really well with that. I talked earlier about training your team to sell. I think, Krista, you have some ideas too about menu item bingo and things like that.
Yeah, so some examples that we've seen is getting your staff to kind of just gamify that experience. So give them a list of items and say, like, at the end of this week, whoever can sell a particular amount of this item wins a prize or something like that, gives them recognition. The top this game too, that's a great one I've seen, is going back and forth and basically you give your waiters a dish and you tell them how are all the different ways that you could upsell this item. So that way you're giving your other staff members different ideas on how to upsell. Also, you are gamifying it so that you're giving your staff kind of an incentive to jump in and think of better ideas.
Thanks, Crystal. Just building on that, it's really important you think about the way you teach your staff to do, even any interaction with your guests, but particularly if you're trying to upsell. Words matter. The phrasing is important. I really like suggestive selling, where the server gets to explain or be passionate about what they like on the menu the best and why. If they can say, hey, you know what, don't overlook the whatever, this particular dessert or this particular meal. This is my favorite thing, and here's why. I think that's better and more authentic than some formulaic thing that you've memorized. The one thing, the couple of phrases I hear all the time in bars and restaurants that I don't like are when I'm, they come by to see if they want to clear my plate and they say, "Are you still working on that?" I always think that sounds kind of strange. I come to a restaurant to relax, not to work. And then my absolute thing I like the least, I can't believe how poor our industry is at selling desserts. Let me preface this by saying it's my observation that most people always want a dessert. If they can get away with it, then they can justify it to themselves. And especially when you go out for dinner, something that caps off the meal makes the whole meal better and more memorable. And yet we don't do a very good job of selling desserts. I think part of it is the phrasing. We come to the table at the end of their meal and we look at the table and we say, did you save any room for dessert? And it automatically sounds like I really shouldn't be eating more food. I just consumed all these calories. It makes me feel guilty immediately for even thinking about ordering dessert. I don't really like that phrasing. Again, suggestive selling works really well. If the server comes by, I don't think they should ask if people have room for dessert. I think they should put a dessert menu in front of everybody, a very small, limited dessert menu. And then the waiter or server should reach over to lean over to the table and say, sort of maybe in a stage whisper, "I love the chocolate ganache. It just melts on the plate, and they've got this great ice cream in it. It's a combination of hot, cold. But take a look. I'll come back and see what you'd like." I think just those little phrasing make a big difference. And if people don't want a dessert, you can still sell them something. Then they're going to be happier for it. You suggest they split desserts. Some restaurants, they could take some home. But I think splitting desserts gets people ordering at least one dessert, and then sometimes they talk about it. Well, you know what? I'd rather have this, and they end up ordering two. And if they don't want a dessert, I got back from a trip to Italy, and really no meal was complete without a cafe or a cappuccino, and people love that after dinner or an after dinner cocktail. If you vividly describe your food and drinks the way I'm suggesting here, studies have shown that you can increase your sales by 25, 27%. One other idea I like is, and Crystal, you and I were talking about this before, is sort of a FOMO idea. When you sit at your table and you come by to introduce yourself as a server, you say, "Hey, before we start, we only have a limited number of the mushroom risotto tonight. I just wanted to let you know ahead of time." Sort of the idea that you might run out of something makes that item more appealing, and it's a great way to sell some things you really want to promote. Crystal, back to you.
All right, thanks. So into our fifth and final hidden loss, we're going to look at high printing costs. So a lot of bars and restaurants use printable versions of, table tents, posters, menus, and that's great because they are hands-on, but the ROI on these items is considerably lower. Luckily, there is a lot of digital solutions that get the same job done, but also saves you that time and money that can be applied elsewhere. So these come in the form of digital signage and tablet menus. So with tablet menus, your customers basically have a touchscreen version of your menu. And before we were talking about this with the payment, they can also place orders on the device, close out and pay on these tablets too. So this ultimately eliminates menu reprints because obviously you're using a digital version. But say that you accidentally have a typo or you come up with a new menu item and you really want to add that to your menu. If you stuck to printing, you would constantly have to go back to the printers to get those menus, dropping that money. But with a digital version, the software on these tablets actually lets you customize and change items in and out very easily, all while avoiding that extra cost for the changes made. It's also a great way to use photos that can give your customers a more vivid look at your dishes or drinks, which can lead to a lot of upsells too, like Ian was talking about. Describing your specific items vividly. Obviously, you're painting a picture and making your items more appealing. So you can prompt the tablets to actually encourage add-ons like fries and other sides so that you are increasing that check size as well. It's also a great way to do the suggestive selling because the tablets are doing it for you. You don't really have those close-ended questions that your customers can avoid. Now, a lot of people are wary when it comes to these tablets because they're worried it takes away from staff members. But in reality, these tablets are meant to be a tool to help them and streamline operations. So if customers can order and pay on the tablets, that means that employees can cover more tables. Again, this could link back to also reducing those labor costs that we talked about, depending on how busy your bar or restaurant is. And the other way to avoid high printing costs is with digital signage. So this means that you're basically turning your existing TVs and monitors into digital posters and billboards. So like with the tablet menus, a great reason to go digital is because it's so easy to customize what you're displaying. You can promote upcoming events that you're encouraging customers to come back. You can promote new items or specials. In fact, Nielsen did a study and they found that point of sale purchases increased by up to 33% when using digital signage. And that's because you're constantly reminding your customers about specific items on your menu. Especially if you are using those bottom line focused CTAs that we talked about. So the try today or buy now. And this is why they also found that when promoting specific items on a digital screen, you can expect those orders to increase by an average of 90%. And that's insane, but it also means that more sales, more money, also while avoiding the hidden loss of printing costs. So it's basically a win-win operationally and marketing-wise for you guys. All right, so those were our 5 hidden costs, and hopefully you guys picked up some tips on how to get ahead and tackle those. To wrap it up, our key takeaway is that you want to have set processes in place. Whether that's how you're responding to people on social media, how you're tracking your inventory, how you're training your staff to upsell, you want a uniform and set process so that you have as much control over your product and operations as possible. We also encourage you guys to try that new technology. It can seem daunting, but a lot of tools out there, the scheduling apps, inventory tracking tools, the digital signage, they're designed to be user-friendly and help you guys be more efficient and organized. Lastly, with all these changes in place, make sure that you are constantly monitoring. This means your inventory levels, your staff interactions, your menu items. If you notice that something is lacking, make sure that you change those in your processes. And if you see something that's working well for you, create incentives to keep encouraging that behavior. It's all about finding what works best for your business. All right, so we do hope you guys enjoyed our presentation. At this point, we can go over any questions you guys have. If you want to go ahead and chat those over to us on the right. We'll wait a little bit. All right, I actually see one here for you, Ian. So they say it is really difficult to find staff these days, so I don't want to fire anyone. It sounds like I might need to if I find large inventory losses. How would you handle that staffing-wise?
That's a great question. It is extraordinarily hard to find staff these days in every industry, and particularly the staff we're trying to find. I guess I would say this: none of our clients would use our service if it came with firing people. That's not really the goal here. And it actually is rarely necessary. Once you have some accountability and you know what's going on in the bar, and most importantly, your bartenders and staff know that you know if there's a problem, you know if a drink's getting overpoured, you know if it's getting not rung up. They tend to stop those bad practices. They know they're accountable for it, and it tends. This is a weird thing, but it tends to become a more positive, happier place to work, because the manager's not always trying to catch people doing things wrong. They have the information to know if there's a problem, and if there's not, they're happier. So I guess the quick answer is you almost certainly won't lose staff.
Awesome. And then another one, so that orange slushy drink sounds delicious. How should I develop a signature drink?
Well, that's an art more than a science. I think if it was my bar, I would put my bartenders to work on it. I'd sit my bar team down. I'd explain to them what our goals are, and I'd say go to it, and maybe even have a contest out of it. I think that would be kind of fun, and it would also let the bartenders feel like a huge sense of ownership over this drink and help them promote it more. So.
Oh, for sure. And then from a social media standpoint too, that's great content. If you can like film your bartenders and their contests, or like the behind the scenes of making these signature drinks, that gets a lot of engagement. So that's just another idea for you guys to share.
That's a great idea.
All right. And last one that I'm seeing is, how much does an inventory program cost?
Well, that's a good question too. I think the strange answer is it shouldn't cost you anything. It's designed to make you money, not cost you money. If you can eliminate, if you're spending $1,000 a month, let's say, on an inventory program, but it's making you $4,000 a month, then it's not really costing you any money. It's making you money. But I don't want to dodge the question. There's a lot of different options out there. For example, we have an app that's only $20 a month, but the things that really make an impact run from anywhere from about $300 a month to maybe $1,200 a month, depending on how big the bar is, how much of it you want to do in-house. Those types of things. But again, the ROI is usually about 400% on that stuff.
Awesome. All right. And then I see, Kirk, you're asking in rough terms, what do Sculpture and BuzzTime charge for their services? I know, at least from BuzzTime perspective, you can actually reach out to that email at buzztime.com. Give us a little more information. I know our sales team can reach out, because it does depend on each location.
And Kirk, for us, as I said, it can range depending on how much you want to do and in-house and just what kind of results you want to get. Here's one. What is the ideal food cost for fine dining, surf and turf cuisine on the California coast? The rest does, it looks like. The problem with that question is that it really depends. There can't be a ideal food cost, or pork cost for that matter, that's going to work for two identical or two almost identical, dining establishments, because they're going to sell drinks for a different price, sell food for a different price. They're also going to have a different product mix. So, the one might sell more pastas, which have a lower food cost. Others might sell more steak, which have a higher food cost. And even within a surf and turf restaurant, there's different steaks you make different profit margins on. So, it requires some software to be able to work out what your ideal food cost is, or pork cost. You need to have recipes entered into a software program, and it gets a ratio of your sales and can tell you that. I know that's not a simple answer, but it's the best.
There you go. All right. Any other questions, guys? Going once, going twice. All right, so thanks again, guys, for joining us. We hope you learned a couple of new tactics you can implement. Thank you, Ian and Sculpture, for joining us today, too. So one of you guys asked, we are going to be sending out a recording of this presentation and a recap shortly after we conclude this. But if in the meantime you guys do have any questions, feel free to email me or Ian. Our emails are up on the screen right there, and we'll be sure to get back to you. So thanks again, guys, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Crystal. Nice job.
Thanks.